but we really want to just kind of keep it high level and just talk through some of the areas. Really, it's a state of progress. It's a journey where you're going to enter it at different points. Different institutions and different organizations are at various areas. And so what you can look at it as a maturity model to say, well, where am I, where are we in the process? And what are the kind of things that we're going to need to look at or consider if we want to move towards the right to become more transformative and more digitally first in this day and age. So if we focus in on security, what does that model kind of look like? So entry level is really very traditional, no real identity or security in place. Pretty much everything is old and on premises. Lots of siloed data sets all over the place, really, really difficult to manage identity, to manage security. When we move over to emerging, we're saying, okay, well, now we've got a level of identity and access management set up. We're starting to think centrally. We're starting to think about how we can manage devices. We're starting to maybe consider cloud options to help bring these things together. And so we're starting to step forward in that journey, saying, sheesh, we really need to pay attention to data assets, to the security of our people, the security of our students that are coming to site, and so we're needing to solve some of those problems. When we move to advanced, we're looking at all sorts of other things, like how do we start looking at really providing centralized access control, and what could that do, and how do we manage that or manage the whole campus from a security access point of view. If we're looking at the flow of students and staff members into various areas, who's allowed to go where, how can we control that? And that's, you're going to start needing to integrate different environments together to make that happen. It's not just about security, it's also about back-end systems data that you need to access and all that kind of thing. And we're going to show you some of the work that we're doing in that space at the moment. And when we get to the kind of transformative side, there we're looking at AI first and infused access control. We're thinking of facial recognition. In pre-COVID, we would have talked about maybe fingerprint biometrics or some other kind of thing, but it's really a more advanced level of control to say, hey, what else could we do if we had cameras and we had things looking at student flow? How could we detect potential issues before they even became issues and dispatch security to help people out in awkward situations, whatever the case may be. So it's moving from just monitoring where people are going to now using the data and leveraging the systems to really keep people safe, make sure that they're having the best experience possible on campus and so forth. So that's really where we get to that transformed state. So it brings up that question around data and saying, okay, well, if we're at that entry level of data, we have probably disconnected systems. We've got these silos all over the place, legacy systems, things are on premises, really, really difficult to extract any kind of meaning out of it, and no kind of integration between those systems, which is a bit of an issue. If we move into something more emerging, maybe thinking of getting a kind of data warehouse in play to try and branch or bridge that legacy data or siloed data issue. So you've got the kind of startings of a data warehouse. You may be thinking of a hybrid cloud kind of environment to think of, well, gee, I've got a lot of data. We need to produce some better reports, and I need to have a bit of elasticity from the cloud. So you're going to start thinking of new ways to use that data and what can you get out of it. Our experience with data is that the more questions you ask and the more answers you get from the data, you ask some more questions again. And so it's an evolutionary concept that never kind of ends. The more reports you get, the more reports you want. And so as we moved into advanced, we need to start thinking about where do we get data from that we can create better, more intuitive reports. We can start bridging the connection between systems. We can look at back-end ERP or finance systems. We can look at student information management systems. We can bring core CRM platforms in there that are helping with student success management. We can look at Internet of Things and bringing device-related data. We're really trying to bring all the data into one place so that we can start doing something with the data. We can become more intelligent in the way that we serve our students, the way that we serve our staff members, by just doing things with data as opposed to letting it sit in these siloed warehouses. And then Getting all the way to the transformative, that's really where we're talking about a data-driven culture, where you're putting data at the center of decisioning. You're saying, we've got dashboards, these are mission critical, they're guiding how we do things, they're informing how we do things, and we're looking at doing statistical modeling and all kinds of things in AI and machine learning to see how much more intelligence can we get from our data to drive better decisions, to build better products, and all those kind of things. Then if we head over to facilities management and maintenance, at the entry point, we're all manual. We're talking about, that triplicate book that guys carry around doing work orders. You've probably got people all over the place, contractors and things fixing plumbing issues and electrical stuff, and you've got kind of maybe a central maintenance team, but lots of manual, maybe one of those whiteboards up on in an office somewhere with trying to figure out who needs to do what and who needs to go where. So it's very reactive, phone calls up and down, emails up and down, really not very pleasant. As we move to emerging, we will say, okay, well, the first step there is to systematize that, to say, we need something to bring us all together. We need to at least digitize the work order process. We need to bring that in. We need to get some control of assets, what are out there, what are we actually maintaining? Are we maintaining buildings, air conditioners, IT equipment, general assets? What are we trying to do? Are we trying to do asset audits? What are the things that we need to send people to various campuses, various buildings to start doing? And so you need a system to start controlling all of those things. Then we move into advanced, where we're saying, well, now I want to step it up a little. I've got control. We're scheduling work orders. We're doing those kind of things. But now I really want to start becoming a little bit more intelligent again. So maybe we want to start looking at IoT or connecting devices to the technology to say, well, we want to start monitoring air conditioners, or we want to start monitoring access control systems, or whatever the case may be. So that's telemetry, right? We're ingesting information that's coming off of the hardware. It's telling us the temperature it's running at, it's telling us whether it's vibrating or not, it's telling us all kinds of things, the pressure that it's under, whatever the case may be. It might just be, if you're monitoring a software asset, it might be uptime. A server went down. We need to know about that before somebody goes, hey, sorry, my application's not working anymore. So bringing those devices into one place and then saying, okay, cool, I've now got some more information in order to dispatch and arrange my workforce out there. And then all the way to transformative, that's where we've got this concept of real proactive maintenance and service. We're doing proper enterprise asset management, cradle to grave. We're managing procurement. We're integrated with our back-end financial systems. We've got full visibility into what's happening on the ground. We're automatically scheduling people to get out and do proactive maintenance, so we're not sitting in a place where we have unbudgeted expenses, where we have no control over what's going on. We're fully in control. And of course we'll have the odd break fix thing that we need to do, but that's the dream, is to move into that more proactive stance. And then the last piece that we're going to get into in more detail, but just to introduce the framework, is on institutional operation. And again, this is around kind of legacy applications on premises. They're all siloed. They don't talk to each other. Lots of flat file stuff everywhere. Lots of Excel work. Pretty much what most organizations look like before digital. Really difficult to report. You've got little kind of kings and queens in charge of little kingdoms who run and maintain their application space, but they don't talk to everybody else. They're not sharing information. They're not leveraging each other's data to make decisions or do anything better. And so we need to move out of that into emerging, where we're saying, cool, let's start looking at ways to connect these application environments. Let's start integrating data, because I want to know. I want my asset information both in my ERP, so I can do proper depreciation and management, and I also want it in my call logging tool, because I need to do more advanced facilities control, etc. So I need to integrate those tools. I need to bring that data together, because I don't want to be capturing this data all over the place in duplicate, triplicate, and so forth, where we've got data issues and all that kind of thing. So we're starting to try and connect and integrate systems together, and when we do that, we create a level of visibility, a level of reporting that we didn't have before. Then we move over to advanced, where we're saying we're integrated. We're looking at cloud first, because we're looking at rapid deployment of apps and the usage of apps across the organization, we're starting to think a little bit more about how we use applications, and this concept of application sprawl becomes something we need to control. An app for everything is great, except it creates more silos, it creates more disconnectedness, it creates more cause for problems to bring things together through integration, which everybody knows is complex and takes time. So what we want to do is start looking at that and saying, well, how do we manage that? How do we automate workflows? How do we simplify that application environment? And the best way to do that is in the transform space, where we're saying we want a central data and application platform that is going to help us to do very many things. It's going to help us to manage HR. It's going to help us to manage our facilities. It's going to help us to interact and manage students. It's helping to control access, etc. And all of these tools and systems come together and bring the data into that same data environment, so that we can look at, hey, we've got some bottlenecks over there in that department that's causing pressure down the line, or whatever the case may be. So as you can see, it's more than just what the name would suggest, a connected campus. It's about buildings and things and people and software all coming together, all converging into a single platform, a single digital environment where we can be more proactive, we can monitor things better, we can provide better service and a better experience ultimately to students, to staff members and faculty. So that's really, that's the goal, that's the framework. And so the rest of the conversation today is really to talk about this journey towards that transformative space. It sounds daunting, potentially, it sounds like a lot to do, but let's break it down, let's get a little bit practical. Excuse me, Graham and I are going to take you through a couple of examples of what we're doing at the moment with different institutions. And we're going to focus on each of these points as we go along. And just say, hey, here's some potential. And I think the idea today is really, it's a start of a conversation. It's a start of thinking that we could do things better. We could potentially do more. We could potentially get more from what we already have. And so that's the goal of today's webinar. So we're going to start off with security management, and I'm going to bring Graham up to the mic. And he's going to take you through an example of some of the stuff that we're doing around the security and access control, and hopefully give us a bit of a demo. So Graham, I'm going to hand over to you.
I left the mic dead there for a little while just to make it awkward. All right. Just gonna share my PowerPoint deck. All right. Sean, you can confirm you can see my screen, right?
Yes, we can.
All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a real-world scenario that talks to some of the things that Sean has just presented. And I'm going to try and do it in as practical a way as possible. So I'm going to get started with this little diagram. And I'm going to grab a here, and we can get going. All right. So to start framing this little piece of the presentation, I want to draw your attention to the student, the actual human being who rocks up at your institution and wants to develop their skills and start investing into their future. Now, the more that you think about students and the more that we work with them as we roll out and develop these systems, the more that we realize just how much data they actually generate. And so in this scenario, I'm going to just combine access control and interaction with access control through this sort of digital world that we've been talking about. And as a starting point, I don't want to talk about systems or tech. As a starting point, I just want to try and build a little bit of awareness of how much data students really do generate. So as a starting point, students with their student cards interact with doors on campuses. And there are a couple of things here I'll go through them one at a time. But every time a student passes through an access point or a point where there's a little card reader, they register a tap, which is cool, because already we can start recording how many times students tap on various doors and which doors they've opened. And so we've got an initial data set going just from the action of them touching on the card reader. But that data is not all that's there when a student taps on the card. What we also have is their location at that point of time. And so if you just paid a little bit more attention to your data set and you located your doors and you pinned those geographically on a map of your campus, you would then know, based on taps, what the location of that student was at any point in time. And that brings on this third dimension. This is time, not so much worried about location, but every time that we tap on a door and we record the time of that tap, we have a stamp that allows us to infer certain things. So just as a silly example, we would be able to drill into a student and say, look, if we decided that the front door of their residence was a reasonable measure of what time they're getting up in the morning, we would be able to, for a student, determine what their average wake-up time is every day, as a silly example. But then if we did that across the student universe, we would start to be able to get behavioral trends just on the basis of their interaction with the door. Then we would also be able to see, look, what are the frequencies at which students are accessing particular doors. So you put taps onto a time scale and all of a sudden we know which doors students use more than others, and we know how often they're going into particular doors, because remember, doors typically reflect venues. And so we can start to measure frequency and see how often they go into various rooms and start collecting data accordingly. I just heard my Teams ping, so I'm just making sure that I'm not going to lose track of anybody who picks on the chat window. Okay, Sean, can I ask you that if anybody does chat, I'm not going to watch it. Will you just unmute and interrupt me?
No problem.
Cool. All right, so the ability to know which doors a student has access to gives us the information I've spoken about to now. One interesting side effect is that we can actually map per student, if we have access to just the taps on the doors, we can map how they walk around in campus, what routes they typically take when they go to various venues. We can see, if you just profile, be able to see which particular venues or halls and stuff they went into, and you'd be able to visualize that on a map. And so just from tapping doors, we get quite a lot of data. Students generate, like there's a ton of data sitting there. If we chose to be a little bit cleverer, and in some situations we can be, we can even refine that data set. So there's a difference between a door and a lane. A door would let me into a venue. A lane would be a subset within a venue. And so if I was thinking about a library and I said the door at the library lets me into the library, the lanes might be which floors I've typically gone to. I know in the meal management space, which is mostly what I'm going to talk about in this demo, we're able to put multiple lanes inside of dining halls, and then also see and be able to see which lanes students prefer. And then, if you're just a little bit creative, you go and put different meals on different lanes, and you can start to profile how different meals perform, which are preferred, what students prefer to eat, and you can start learning about them in a bunch of different ways. And so lanes give me quite a lot of additional information. So in sort of the facilities management context, I can know which floor a particular student is in at any one time. Another thing that you can tell from lanes, which I'm going to address here under lectures as well, is you can tell how many people are in a particular location at a time just because of the data that students are generating through something as simple as access control. Then in terms of ITS, ITS owns quite a lot of data relating to students. So as an example, from ITS, we can know which residence they live in. We can get access to how they're funded and which timetable they're currently attached to. What will often happen in the higher education space is that students will be on different timetables at different periods during the year. So normal timetable when they're studying, but when they go onto exams, that might shift a little bit, and ITS typically has the data that allows us to do that. And so just from a student's perspective, there's already quite a large surface area of what we can know about students. This next pillar is, you can actually see, I tried to be clever, and I turned my little preferences shape into what hopefully you'll recognize as an iPhone. Students, if we can just get mobile-based access to students so that we can collect additional interaction from them, we can start to allow them to overlay our data set with their preferences. So one example in the meal management space would be to say, look, if we decide to put different meals on different lanes, so we put bacon and eggs and sausages and all the oily stuff for the Oompa Loompas like me, and that's what I want to eat every day. And then on the other lane, we go and put yogurt and, I don't know, strawberries. See, I don't really know much about healthy food. We put that in a different lane. Then we could allow students through mobile access to be able to indicate which lane they would prefer to use. And that gives us some really cool side effects, the ability to control our vendors, make sure that we're not over catering, make sure that we're not overspending, and all sorts of stuff that happens there. But there'll be enough of that in the demo that's coming. One of the additional side effects of collecting data is that you can start to see things that you never knew you could see before. So as an example, if I took a student in a lane in a meal hall, and all I did was one subtle change in my data, I went and said, look, on that meal hall for that particular lane, the average nutritional value of the meals that are served there are X. So in other words, a yogurt contributes X in terms of calories and calcium and all the various different vitamins, and fruit does the same. And we went and profiled it. If I knew then which lanes they tapped on and which preferences they had, I could get a really reasonably strong estimate of what kind of nutrition was going on there. And there is some fun stuff that we're talking about in the space where we potentially can link nutrition to academic performance, and also link lack of nutrition to interventions that essentially become assistive to the students. And so there's some cool stuff that we can do there. Quality I put here, I think this is a cool one. If I gave you an example in sort of the meal space, if we had 3 dining halls, each dining hall was owned by a different vendor, and I knew what student preferences were, it would take me 6 months and I would see student preferences in terms of meals in their voting, because students vote with their feet. So we would even be able to do quality assessments of the various vendors running the dining halls if we were able to connect students to their preferences. And I'll show you how we've been able to do that in a real life example. And then the last little blocky here, I'm really hoping that in real world education, the on-premises education anyway, that students are wanting to be in lectures. But if we just put doors on lecture halls and we collected taps linked to doors linked to lecture halls, we could start drawing some interesting correlations. And I think I've got that in here. Oh, there we go. We can draw some interesting correlations between how often they access the various lecture halls, added to their overlaid on their timetables, and then look at the door taps, and we could see whether or not there's real life correlations between lecture attendance and results, and the number of lectures attended can then be used for additional sort of student management functionality. So just from a basic access control point of view, with just the overlay of preferences, you can see there's an absolute stack of stuff that students are telling us by tapping a student card on a wall. This RT occupancy, it was supposed to be a room threshold. And basically what I was saying there is if you had a scenario where, for example, you wanted to limit occupancy in a particular venue, call it maybe for something like COVID compliance, then this is something that we would be able to control with this data set, because we'd know in detail what was happening in each one of the venues, because we can demarcate them with doors. So that's what that is. Okay, so the point of the slide was really to just kind of look at the student and just get everybody kind of aware of how much data students actually generate. And all I'm looking at is their access control. I'm not looking at any of the other data sources that you might have in your institution. And already I can get quite a rich surface area that I can then use. So the question then is, how do you use it? And so I took all my labels away and I've added another layer. So the first thing that we do is, and Sean alluded to this in his piece of the presentation, the first thing that we do is we put a platform in place that allows us to collect that data. So I'll show you an example of it in a minute, but basically what we're wanting to do is we're wanting to say, look, let's take students and let's put them somewhere where we intend developing a student data set. And so typically what we're doing, and we do it fairly often at the moment, is we go and we take students out of ITS and we put them in the platform. Then we go and take doors and lanes and lecture halls and all of those kinds of things, and we put them in the platform too. And then obviously all of the transactional data that gets generated by any of these sources, we go and put in here as well. So what we end up with is one central place where we've got access to the way that students are traveling around the university, which doors they're tapping, which meals they're eating, what their preferences are. We've got demographic information because of what we can get out of RTS. In some cases, we've taken other data out of here. So like we've looked at whether or not they're funded by NSFAS, or we've looked at whether or not, or which study programs they're on. We've taken things like whether or not they're day students or resident students or temporary students. We put them in the platform. And so we start to collect a really nice, robust set of data that's centralized that we can then use in really, really cool ways. I'm hoping to show you some of that in a minute. So the first step is to kind of get the platform in place. And then the next thing is to leverage what you can do next. And that's what this automation layer is all about. So the scenario that I'm going to take you through is the controlling of how students eat and what they can eat and when they can eat and how much they can eat and how often they can eat, and to overlay that with vendor data. And hopefully by the end of the demo, you'll have a really good idea of what's possible just off of a couple of simple data sets. So the data sets that I'm going to be going through is a student data set, tiny little bit of data from RTS, and then information from doors, lanes, and then potentially lecture halls and libraries and those kinds of things as well. So in a nutshell, this is the overall overarching architecture, the design, and the intention of the slide is to show you that students generate a lot of data. That data might be lying in various places, and if you can get it into a platform, you can do really cool stuff with it. That's the harbor tour. So let me show you some examples. So you'll see at the top of my slide, I've got solution with this really geeky developer-y type / vibes going on here. And I've said start with students. So if you're going to look digital and you want to start unlocking digital in the campus environment, a great place to start is with the student record themselves. And it doesn't need to be a heavy record. It doesn't need to be everything with every possible data point considered. And you can start out with a really, really basic record. So what I've got here is I've got the data service, that platform. This is what you're looking at. And what I've brought in is some basic students, and you can see that they're listed here. This can go up to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of records, no problem, but at least we've got a base data set going. This is a data set we typically would integrate with RTS, and we keep those two synchronized. What I want to point out just in terms of digital is that this thing here is housed in a tool that allows me to interact with the data. As you can see, it's quite a nice user-friendly tool, but it is also a data service, which means that any other system that wants to then work with students is able to work with this data as well through a set of RESTful services. So if you have people who are going to be developing custom apps, mobile apps, or you've got people who are going to be building websites or new components into websites. Instead of cloning and creating another sprawl of student data, this is a really good place to come and home it, and everybody can use it. So in terms of starting off with the connected campus message in real life, students are a good place to start. And so we get them into the system. Then we do some really, really simple stuff as a starting point. We get their basic demographic information. Here you can see, wow, I'm not going to try and say that name, Zindler. You can see that this person is not currently in residence. And so already I've got a data point here that is something that I can use. They don't currently have a residence. If they were in one of your residences, we would then have tried to populate that. But this is an example of an augmented data, an example of how we would augment the data. And that's why this second point here is called augment the data. A couple of other things we've put in here. Just in this simple screen, we've put their qualification in. So we can then use their qualification together with their routes to make certain inferences about how students are traveling within various specializations. We've got an email address, but here I think is the interesting piece for this particular solution. This is a real solution. Here you'll see this particular student has been categorized as a day student, but they've also been marked as special intervention. And so in this particular context, what this means is that this particular individual has been marked as somebody who requires meals for a reason that is not typically seen in financials. So in other words, I haven't purchased residence and so I'm not entitled to meals 3 times a day. This may be because for whatever reason, this particular student has special needs and is struggling with low nutrition or is in a low income bracket and can't afford meals. And so there may have been an intervention that's given that person the ability to be marked as special intervention. So what we do with this is we go and we say, well, now I'm going to use this data and I'm going to decide if and when this person can eat and where they can eat. So just as a starting point, some minor little extensions to a really base profile, and we can start doing some cool stuff. So just by virtue of me knowing that this particular person is a day student who has special intervention needs, I can then start doing some stuff, and I'll show you what that is in a second. The next step is to collect what I've called transactional and real-time data. So what I've got here is an example of data that we've integrated with Salto. Salto is a fairly standard access control system. What we've done is we've allowed Salto to communicate with Dynamics in real time. So as this particular individual moves around in the university, we can see their movements and we can see which doors they're tapping on and all that kind of stuff. And we can see it in near real time. So we're getting access to the information within 2 or 3 seconds of each card tap. And that's what's building up this data set. So just in terms of this contact record, the summary tab, which you can see hidden a little bit here in the screenshot, is where I had that categorization data and the base profile data. Then I've just augmented that data with this transactional data so that I know where they're moving. And then the last thing is to then, and I've titled it Light Up the Automation. The last thing that we've done is access that automation layer and gone and done some cool stuff. So with this particular student, we've gone and looked at their special needs categorization, and we've used that data to drive a rules engine that determines where this person is allowed to eat. And so just in a simple data set, what we do is we go and say, well, because that student is marked as a day student that is a special needs student, we're going to allow them to eat at a certain frequency and at a certain set of dining halls. And so you can see in this data, the system has automatically gone and determined that this person is allowed to eat dinner in dining hall E, allowed to eat breakfast in dining hall E, and each one of these records is a specific individual meal. And so the system is continuously able to monitor the conditions in data because we've brought that data into the platform, and it's constantly able to make real-time decisions as to whether or not to allow this person to eat. Now, this data set's quite a simple one. If you look at the columns, it really, I know who the person is allowed to eat. I know that they're allowed to eat dinner. I know that they're allowed to eat dinner in dining hall E. This probably was determined because dining hall E is a default for people who don't have a home residence. And then this status I'll talk about in a minute. And if you just look peeking out the corner here is a date. And that's the date on which this person is allowed to eat this meal. So what we do with this, which is really cool, is because we're connected and we're using the platform that can speak backwards and forwards between systems, we go and say, because this person's allowed to eat dinner at dining hall E tomorrow, then when it comes dinner time at dining hall E, we dynamically open the gate for her at that particular time. And so she doesn't have access to that gate or that dining hall at any other time other than in the periods that we stipulate. And so just the ability to see what we should be issuing gives us the ability to control her access to the various dining halls. And we do it in real time, and we do it specifically between different windows. And there are some side effects of that I'm going to talk about in a second that I think start to develop quite a compelling value proposition. The last step is to connect the students. And so I've got an example of a mobile phone. This is an app that exists. Basically, what it allows students to do is we say, because you're allowed to eat meals at specific dining halls at specific times, and we can determine what those are based on rules that we can configure because we can see your data, we can spit out a schedule for you. And so from the end student's point of view, they get a meal management app and they get to select their meals. And so what you're looking at is a user who's logged into the app. The app has gone and looked at various data points. It's gone and determined when they can eat, and it's gone and generated entitlements. And so what you're looking at now is the system telling me, as the user who's logged in, that I'm allowed to eat on Monday and I can have breakfast and dinner. I'm allowed to eat on Tuesday and I can have breakfast and dinner. The next screen just shows me inside what it looks like when I turn those on. You'll actually see that I was entitled to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, but I hadn't elected to eat lunch because you can see I've expanded this Monday. Now, this is me collecting your preferences, right? That's what I referred to earlier, because here, our rules engine is determined that we always force this person to eat in dining hall 1 for breakfast. I see the labels are all wrong. These should say lunch and dinner. But these two switches over here would allow me to toggle between eating in hall 1 and eating in hall 2 for my lunch meal. And then obviously this one should say dinner, and it's a prescribed meal. So the student can then turn the meal off, turn the meal on, and then select a preferred dining hall for their midday meal. And so when it comes, I've been saying a bunch of times as I've been going through the demo, there's a bunch of implications, a bunch of implications. One of the things that happens is now, because we're collecting in real time how students are accessing doors and lanes, and so we also know how they're accessing dining halls, there's a bunch of stuff that we can tell. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to end my screen share, and I'm going to share the actual model with you. So I just want to show you a couple of things that we can see. Just because students have generated two very simple data sets, we know whether or not they're in residence, and we know whether or not they're entitled to eat. And we've got a rules engine that can generate entitlements to eat, and we know their card taps. Those are the really basic data points. Just give me a sec. I'm just waiting for the model to load up on my side. All right, it is a real model, so it's just taking a few seconds to refresh. Here comes my screen. All right. Sean, can you confirm that you can see the model?
Got you.
Okay, cool. Right. So those simple data sets, just the ability to have looked at a student and realized what their card taps mean to us, and then looking at just one or two data points that we've been able to trawl from ITS, we've been able to make a whole plethora of decisions and show a whole bunch of stuff here that we can then monitor. So what you're looking at is a data set that is generated off of this scenario that I've been describing. And so you can see currently that we're servicing a surface area of 2,765 students. of those 2,765 meals, 931 are breakfast, 1,360 are lunch, 474 are dinner. If you look down the bottom, you can see that we're able to profile the amount of traffic. I'm going to need to explain these in a little bit more detail over a time period. And so that's what we're looking at down the bottom. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to squeeze the time period, because it was for the whole of August, all the way through to September. I'm just going to squeeze it a little bit. I'm going to squeeze it a little bit more. There we go, just to clean up the data visualization. So now we're looking from the 9th of August to the 1st of September. You can see that my trends have updated, and at least what I wanted to do was I just want to get to the point where you can see the dates on the bottom. So if, for argument's sake, we were sitting here on August 21st, which it appears that this data set, this was the last time that this data set was updated. If I was sitting here, I would now be able to predict roughly how many students are still going to be coming through for meals. And so I can see that in data, because the entitlements get pre-issued. So what I could then do, and this is where it starts to become quite cool, I could say, look, I've got a particular vendor in dining hall 1. So let me select that particular vendor, and I can already say to finance, look, for this period, we're only expecting 187 students to be entitled to eat in this particular dining hall over this period. 69 of those meals are breakfast, 91 of them are lunch, 27 of them are dinner. A whole bunch of them have been redeemed already, but I can then, in fairly granular detail, predict throughput at that particular dining hall. And so I can say to them, look, for the remainder of August, if we were sitting in August, this is how many meals you're expecting each day. And so that particular vendor then is able to thaw less food, waste less, prepare more, and the university is also able to control at a far more granular detail, at a far more granular level, how many meals they should be issuing in that particular time period and how many to expect. So you get both the ability to predict and manage operations as a result of just access control within the various dining halls, but you also get the ability to then control finances, right, and negotiate tighter contracts, different contracts, because you're able to see in real time what your actual consumption is and your forecasted consumption coming up in the future. And that was really just 2 basic data points that gave us the ability to do that. Another thing that we can see, and I'm just going to turn dining hall 1 off so that we're looking at the whole data set again. If you look at this thing, at these 2 here, you can see I've got breakfast, dinner, and lunch profiled on the timeline, and this side I've got booked, issued, and redeemed. So if I look at the redeemed line, which is this orangey brownie worm that is traveling here, you could see here that I am really only redeeming a peak of 21 meals. Now, redeemed is an actual card tap at a door, at a lane, in a meeting hall, in a meal hall, in a dining hall, between the times that that particular meal is open. So what we do is we open the door for the student for that particular meal, and if they go through and tap it, we redeem that particular meal in real time. So we also know in absolutely granular detail which meals students were entitled to and which meals they actually ate, and we know exactly where they ate those meals. And if you put lanes inside the dining halls, we'll even know which lane they used to redeem that particular meal. And so in real time, you get to see that. Now, here's where it starts to get interesting. If I'm only redeeming 20 meals and I have a total here, you can see here I'm expecting, let's just go to that same day. Let's go to the 19th. There's 21 meals that were redeemed, but on the 19th, on this side, you can see there were 32 meals that were eligible for eating in total. So there, if I add those up, that's roughly, what's that, 60-ish. So roughly 60 meals is what we would have been eligible to produce and force and make available, when in real life only 21 were consumed. And so it gives us the ability in real time to control consumption and our conversations with our vendors. So it's quite a cool data set. The other thing that I just wanted to point out, and then I'll be done, is you can also say if you had different vendors in different dining halls, you would be able to say which ones are more popular. So in this one, you can clearly see people are eating lunch. That's the most popular meal by far. And if I did that, I would then be able to say, look, for the most part, they're eating that lunch in dining hall 2 and 3. 1 and 4 are getting marginal traffic by comparison. And so there's a bunch of different stuff that you can see just from a basic transactional data set that's honed in a platform. And so that's pretty much what I've got. If anybody else wants me to dig around in this data set more, I'm happy to do it. But I think swings and roundabouts, I've given you an idea of what something as simple as transactional data from access control and a really basic interaction with ITS gives me the ability to do a whole bunch of stuff. And I think this is just an example of the underlying value proposition that is inherent in this connected campus message. Cool. I think, Sean, over to you.
Thanks, Graham. Really appreciate that. Lots of insight coming through there. And got my screen shared.
Okay. I had a cat to chase.
It's all good. So that brings us to the next point in the conversation around data. And as you can see, there's lots of different ways to fetch the data, consume the data, and start doing things with it, which is what the next piece of this is all about. So what I wanted to do was just talk to you a little bit first about how Microsoft is looking at data at the moment. And this little slide, I can't remember the exact term that they give it, but I think they call it their data transformation flywheel. But it's their actual core mission statement at the moment of Microsoft, these 4 pillars: to engage students, to optimize operations, to empower employees, and transform products. So right at the core of Microsoft's current corporate mission is to help you as institutions or companies out there to get more out of their systems, their data, and to empower people to do more. And right at the heart of everything is data. And as you've seen from Graham's demo, the ability to collect information around how students are engaging with various areas of the university, bringing that data back into a central hub where we can start applying intelligence. We can start looking at, as you were saying, the consumption or redemption of meals against what was available, the management of vendors, etc. If we didn't have access to that data, we couldn't optimize the way that we order, the way that we forward plan, the way that we buy things. And if you just think about crowd control, as Graham was talking about in COVID times, saying we need to limit people and how many people in a certain area at one time, not having data is going to be incredibly difficult to do that. And so really as we are working with systems, we need to ingest that data and then do something with it, empower people to do something, bring that data back in, and more and more and more. And we've spoken here about access control and about student security, but if you just think about, as an example, the rapid shift to online learning and digital first education, we've got some very interesting things to think about around how engaged are students with digital content, as an example. And so we've got a whole new data universe to look at. It wasn't necessarily something that you worried about when you had a classroom full of people that you were lecturing, because they were all there and theoretically you had their attention. Having been one of those people, I can tell you that you definitely don't have their attention all the time. But online now we've got this huge barrier because they're not here, they're not in front of me, I can't see them. And so we need to look at different signals, at different ways of engaging. And so we need to go and as we augment our products and we say, look, our core learning product is now being provided over a brand new channel with all new kinds of nuances and new things, I need to know how students are engaging with that channel. I need to understand that. And so data sits right at the core, because if we understand that, if we can collect that, we can then start optimizing. We can further transform our products. We can say, look, even webinars. This particular webinar is probably the last one that we'll have in this format. We're changing how we do things and saying, well, people don't have an hour or 2 hours to sit in a room and watch a webinar. We want to split it up into bite-sized chunks that people can engage with the content that they want, because they have 5 minutes making a cup of coffee or whatever the case may be. And so everything is changing and shifting, but you can't do that unless you have the data. So really super important. Then Microsoft take that data and put it into, just to give you kind of an idea of the scale and proportion, they put it in the single Microsoft Cloud, where we have Dynamics, which is some of the technology Graham has shown today. We've got Office 365 that most people are aware of, but really just Office, email, and a whole bunch more. Microsoft, of course, own LinkedIn, which is really important from an alumni point of view, from executive education and those kind of things, because we have a new channel of data to go and look at potential clients and all that kind of thing. And then we've got the Azure platform, which is where everything is hosted. That's the engine room in the sky, so to speak. And Microsoft put all this data into something they call the Common Data Service, which it's a huge deal. What it means is that Microsoft are thinking about, as they scale out their technology, as they scale out the solutions and things that they offer, they're putting everything into this one central common data service that we can use that data with other systems, with other applications. So Graham's talking there about meal management, saying, I want to bring in card taps because we need to manage meals. We need to manage who's up taking what meal. But while I have that card tap, who else is interested in this data? Do we need to know that from a security point of view, from a crowd control point of view? Do we need to know that from a, potentially understand that maybe in a harassment case where we know that a student is being harassed by another student, if they're in the same proximity, could we fire off a warning to the student that's potentially being harassed to say, look out? There's lots of different things, in the primary and secondary space. We're talking about simple things like, if mom and dad arrive at the gate, send a message off to the student to say, hey, mom and dad is here to pick you up, so that we can control who gets to pick up and we can control access. So having access to that data is not just about putting in one place that nobody has access to it. It's putting it in the common data service that any application, any piece of system that cares about data in that space can pick it up, can do something with it, and we have a fully integrated environment. And that's the vision of Microsoft's Dynamics platform. And I've put data in the center because it's really, that is at the center. So in the Dynamics world, you've got a whole bunch of capability around functional capability around servicing students and clients, selling to them through, let's say, traditional mechanisms like in the business schools or whatever the case may be. But even in a large scale basis, how do we do marketing to students? How do we bring them in? How do we attract them? At the moment, it's silly season, everybody's applying, and the registrars are working off their feet. So, how do we start engaging and helping and supporting that process? And so we can talk for days on this slide, but it's really every single piece of the puzzle that you would need to run an efficient operation sits within this Dynamics platform. And of course, if, for example, you're using ITS to do student management and maybe some finance and supply chain kind of things, then that's okay. That's a piece that's third party. We've got to integrate it into this Dynamics platform and start working with it. And we do that all the time. So one doesn't have to have this whole picture to get the benefit. We can bring in your various systems that you have in potentially each one of these pillars into this platform and then start augmenting it with the rest of the Dynamics suite. And all around here, you see the rest of the Microsoft offering. And this is where Microsoft really separates itself out from all the other vendors available, because we need to make sure that we're connected to your email. Because when I'm sending emails to students or responding to issues that they might have on the ground, I'm doing that through Office 365. And so I've got to bring that into one environment and see if we can do more with it. When we need to extend the applications, we need to start doing expense tracking and leave management and whatever, sending out memos or whatever the case may be. We can use Power Apps and automate to automate workflows, to create little applications that solve very specific niche problems that don't deviate from that central system point of view. So we can have a whole long conversation around Power Apps, and Power BI is the platform that Graham showed you. Turning data into intelligence, turn it into a report, visual. You can see the trends, you can see what's going on, and make some decisions. The minute you turn data into something visual, you sense something new, you sense something about it, and you can go and explore. Then on this side, we've got the rest of the intelligence platform, and these are some of the products that Microsoft are creating around artificial intelligence infused applications. So they're saying, well, hey, in the customer service side, as an example, why don't you deploy a virtual bot to take care of some of the initial workload of requests and queries that are coming in, and we can then deal with that in an automated bot sense, and then offboard that back to a human being to continue the conversation. So it's a massive, fully integrated platform with tons and tons and tons of capability. Right, let's move on to the next piece. And so what I wanted to do here is just talk a little bit about this data platform and again, center on the students. And here we've got Taolo. He's a current student at one of our campuses. And here's again, a dynamics record with all Taolo's data. So I can see his contact information, I can see his email address, I can see that he pays for his own tuition, he's the account payer. I can see that he also works at the moment at Ogilvy as an example. I can see his ID number, marital status, whatever I need to know about him, where he lives. And I can also see the context of who he is and where he is in our process. So he might be going through a current application process to come and study with us. And we can see that some student advisor or somebody's busy engaging with him, or potentially he's online and trying to do an online application. So we're gathering as much information about Taolo as we can, and as Popio would allow us to do. We're bringing that into one central place. And throughout the entire life cycle of that student with us, we want to bring that data in, the card taps that Graham was speaking about, the lead information from marketing. Where did they come from? What advertising campaigns did they come through, so that we can determine return on investment on the marketing side. We want to know, where did they originate? Which faculty are they interested in studying with? What kind of qualification are they looking to get? This can start talking through a whole long journey about the student. If they come in looking for a higher certificate, we could potentially upsell them to an advanced certificate, a diploma, an undergrad, a postgrad. These students each are on their journey, and we need to, the more we understand about them, the more we can tailor offering, messaging, etc. to them to help them on their journey towards success. We can also see things like their web interaction with us. So this is just showing you some data that's coming in from the website. Did they go on a certain web page? Did they fill out a form? Did they register for a webinar that we're offering? How are they working with us in an online sense? We can see this is an example of their journey with us. So if you set up very specific journeys that you want to go through, marketing journeys as an example, where if I create a new request for application, then I get an application form. Do I fill it out? If I do fill it out, then what happens? Do I get an email saying, hey, thanks for applying, we're going to get in contact with you? And how do we digitize that whole process? How do we make sure that it's as automated as possible, so that we can provide really seemingly one-to-one level service and engagement, but do that across thousands and thousands of students at any one time? Here's an example of us reaching into ITS to go and fetch Taolo's information, what he's busy studying at. Maybe we want to look at bursaries that he's applied for and been granted. Maybe we want to see academic records. So it doesn't have to reside within Dynamics. It can reside within other systems like ITS or other platforms, and we can bring that data in one central location. We can then also, on the asset side, and to tee that up, if we're issuing assets to students for specific courses or whatever the case may be, and it doesn't have to be a physical assets or a piece of computer equipment. It can also be software assets like a user account or whatever the case may be, we can start managing those things and saying, well, in this case, we're issuing a laptop to Taylor, and we want to make sure that we understand what he's doing with it. Is it in warranty? So that if something goes wrong, we can fix that. So I think the idea that I'm trying to demonstrate here is that these are real world examples of things that we're doing with institutions out there to centrally control data, centrally manage it, bring it into one place so that I can do more with it. And here's an example of a newish module that Microsoft have introduced in the Dynamics platform called Customer Insights. And basically what it is we take all of that data from Dynamics, from Office 365, from your student information management system, from wherever, and we put it into the cloud, and we start creating lots and lots of inferences. Like we can see as an example, his food interests coming from the meal management platform. We can see how much he spends potentially around in different areas of the institution on books and stationery and all kinds of things that we might be offering. Maybe even merchandise, turn it into a real experience. I don't think we do enough of that in South Africa. Look at their value. What kind of courses is Taylor buying from us? Is he doing short course-based work? Is he doing long degree academic programs? What is this person to us, and therefore how can we respond in the best possible way? And so all of the interactions, the emails that are being sent, everything, if we can bring that all into one place, we can start really servicing Taylor in the best way possible. And so that's super, super key, bringing data in, and I hope we've kind of unlocked some of that for you. We're going to push on to facilities management now and have a dive in over there. So facilities and managing assets is really about managing assets. It's about managing devices, buildings, desks, chairs, equipment, whatever. And so it's a whole universe of things that are out there. And what we want to do is we want to, as far as possible, digitize, but also connect digitally, bring information in one place. As I said, if we look at kind of the entry level where a lot of people are, it's manual. There's lots of asset data that's in spreadsheets that you don't know where these assets are. You don't even know if they've been stolen, if they've been sold, if you still own them. And so we need to bring that information into one place. We then need to derive insights from that to say, cool, now I've understood where my assets are, I've understood how they're operating. If we're running Internet of Things, we're potentially looking at the telemetry, at how those assets are operating in real life, and we're bringing all that insight into one place. And so ultimately we can take some action. We can turn the data that I've been talking about now into action, into things that we do to proactively service things. So I'm going to talk about two particular pieces of the puzzle. The first one being connected field service, and the second one being kind of how the life cycle of an asset. So from a connected field service point of view, there's a little simple six-step scenario to just illustrate the possibility. So something goes wrong. Let's use the simple one, air conditioner, or actually let's keep it specific to meal management. One of the gates breaks down, the Salto device is not working correctly, and it triggers off an alert saying, we were expecting kind of a normal throughput during lunch of 20 students through that lane. Now all of a sudden that lane has gone offline for whatever reason, and it's logged a call. That's generated a work order in the system, which is great. We can say, cool, now I've got your work order. We want to apply some advanced scheduling. We want to see who's available. It's not just send someone to go see what's wrong. I know what's wrong. The system is offline. I need somebody with the right skill that can go and fix that equipment. And potentially that skill doesn't exist within our institution. Potentially it exists within our supplier base. But nonetheless, we can go say, okay, what kind of skill do we need so we can dispatch the right person to go fix the problem? When we do dispatch that work order to the technician, they then have full access. They have it on their mobile phone. They can look and see, oh, I've got a Salto device down in dining hall number 1. It's in lane number 2. I know exactly what the problem, well, I don't know yet potentially what the problem is, but I know where the problem is. And so I can very quickly go and sort that out without having to wander around where's the broken thing, speak to 50 different people, send some emails, make some phone calls. Here we've got a work order, got a notification that I've got a new work order. There's all the details. As a technician, I'm straight away into the problem. As I'm making fixes to that issue, all the live updates are going back to the central team to make sure that we have consistent service. That if maybe that wasn't maybe there's a really upset students because now they can't eat, we can deal with that. Maybe they're on the WhatsApp line communicating with meal management services to say, I'm really upset, I can't get my meal, what are you going to do about this? And so rather than having that as a disconnected kind of situation where nobody knows that there was even a problem because maintenance and facilities are completely disconnected from student management, now we can bring those worlds together and we can say, yes, there is a problem. I understand that. I can see that there's a problem in dining hall number 1. I can see that a technician is out solving that problem right now. Please give it 5 to 10 minutes and hopefully the lane will be open. Or we can, maybe go and open up the settings that Graham showed you to say, well, let me make a special workaround for you today to move to a different lane or a different dining hall. And so you can see the power of this interconnected world when we start throwing real life scenarios there. Obviously, we want to make sure that the technicians resolve the issue, and we want to know what happened, what was wrong. Was it a device malfunction? Was there a network break? Was there something on the software that went wrong? What was wrong? What went wrong? Because if we can monitor the kinds of incidences that are happening out there, we can see, okay, well, maybe that particular piece of equipment we shouldn't keep buying because it breaks quite often, right? And so we want to know, are these things functioning within an acceptable threshold of uptime or whatever you want to call it? Does the stuff that we buy really work out there? That's, I guess, the gist of it. And so you can get all that data by the technician just going through a checklist to say, yes, I resolved it. This was the problem, categorizing the issue, boom. Now all of a sudden you have a massive amount of intelligence to say, guys, how much plumbing are we fixing? How many breakdowns in air conditioners are there? Where have we got issues with broken windows or doors or whatever the case may be? And we can start planning our purchasing. We can start looking at saying, well, if I'm going to go and buy lighting and equipment to go and service things or just replacement parts, I need to know kind of what that trend is looking like so that we don't go and do hockey stick spend at the end of the period just because we want to get rid of budget. And so we can get a lot more intelligence behind just some simple things. And of course, all of the stuff combines into this real-time environment. Everything is centrally controlled and you have that full visibility. So it's just from a simple systems that can manage all of these and govern all of this and bring it all together. There's so much power. So that's the field service scenario. If I get into asset management and maintenance, here what we're worried about is really the cradle to grave life cycle. So from buying the asset all the way through to when we dispose of it, how do we manage that? So the first thing obviously is to manage the procurement itself. And here, what I'm going to take you through a couple of things that we've done with Curo, the school group that is around the country. So IT came to us and said, hey, we want to make sure that we're managing and controlling the spend of assets or the purchasing of assets so that we can make sure that we know which teachers have got which equipment, which staff members have got which equipment. We want to get control of that. We want to make sure that there's budget approval through the purchase. And so we went and built for them an internal ordering system that can allow them to browse, and this is just demo data, but they can come in here, browse through, they can see, oh, I like that particular Dell, or I like that Lenovo, I'd like to order that. And through intelligence, we can actually categorize those assets in the first place to say, well, because you're logged in as a specific user, I know you're a teacher in a certain faculty or whatever the case may be, and so you only see the kind of equipment over here that you are entitled to buy. It's pointless showing people things that they can't buy or they can't request because that would just be silly. So giving them the ability or have that intelligence to say what is on offer for you, categorized, they can then put in their requisition. So they go and select their notebook, they add a couple of accessories, this is just like a normal kind of e-commerce experience that a lot of us are used to at the moment as we've moved to buying things online a lot more. This is really simplifying their whole process. Before, this was emails going up and down, it was tickets being logged, what's happening with my stuff, a lot of manual processes. So I go and say, cool, I'm happy with that. I add it to my cart, and then I can see, cool, there's all my products added, and I can go and fill out my details. Maybe I need a request motivation over there. If this is a replacement device, maybe my laptop was stolen, and so we need to put in an insurance claim. So there's a whole bunch of simple things that we can collect through this process that we can then govern and manage and decide where that asset procurement process needs to go and which budget it needs to come out of and all that kind of stuff. So that's asset procurement, and once we've gone and controlled assets and we've made sure that we've put in the right approval limits for different peoples and executive heads and so forth, that the budget owners are ultimately responsible for their budget and they can say, yes, cool, we're authorizing that purchase. So it's gone through. We now need to receive that. We need to tag the asset. We need to locate that asset in a building, in a classroom, in a lecture hall, whatever. We need to say who it belongs to. We need to classify it. Say it's an IT asset. It's a piece of it's a laptop, or no, they bought a desk or a printer or a whatever. Because ultimately, different departments could look after different assets for different reasons. Maybe it's library books. Maybe it's whatever. So we want to be able to classify that. We want to structure in the right place. We want to manage warranties and return information, because if something goes wrong, I don't want to have to scratch around in paperwork that nobody keeps control of to find out where that information is. So we want to centrally control all that too. And ultimately, we want to say, well, who is the user of this asset, or users of this asset, because we want to track that. So if I go again back to Dynamics, here's the asset in question. It's a Dell 5520. And I can see that this asset belongs to Taylor. And so throughout the process, because it's all tagged together, when I look at Taylor's record, I can see, has he logged any calls against this asset? Have there been issues? And that's what we're going to tuck into now. If I didn't know who it was linked to, then I can't see the history. I can't see whether they're abusing it, etc., etc. So now that it's tagged, it's categorized, it's nicely controlled and stored, if there are any issues and we need to send out a work order, like we had in the previous example, we now have central access to that information. So here's Dynamics. We've got a laptop failure issue that's come in. Now, this might be because the students made a phone call and said, listen, my laptop's broken, or maybe it's a staff member, more probably accurate. But I can see which campus do they belong to. I can see where did they originate this particular issue from. So did it come from some kind of monitoring system that we've got running in the back end, or did they make an actual request? Did it even come through that portal that I showed you where they logged a ticket? Where did it come from? I can start categorizing this. What we've got here is the implementation of ITIL principles. ITIL is an IT service management framework which determines how we should provide service in an IT context, but it's a really nice framework to use for other service environments to say, well, if a call comes in or a ticket or an issue is raised, we want to respond within a certain amount of time. We want to make sure that the right people are dealing with it. We want to make sure that it's resolved as quickly as possible. And so in order to do all those things, we need to categorize. We need to set up response timers, and we need to make sure that we are in control of the workflow from start to finish. So this is the incident that Taylor logged because his laptop was broken. And here, if I just go over to the requested details, I can see his full record. I can see the active assets that he's got, any service requests or tickets that he's logged in the past. So you can see that the information is just coming into one place, and that data enrichment is just happening all over the place. I can even go and see, as I mentioned before, we want to locate those assets. And so what we've got here is the ability to take the buildings and break them down into rooms and blocks and floors and all kinds of things. And we want to start locating where assets are. Over here, we've got a Power App, which is displaying the drawing schematic that's coming straight out of the 3D drawing platform. So the architects or the people who look after the buildings go and do drawings if there's any renovations to those. They update those plans, and automatically those plans come back into Dynamics, and I can see well, I'm on block F, and here's block F's floor plan. And a technician who gets this, it's mobile friendly, and they can just scroll in. And this is a simple PDF document that we've produced from that 3D enabled plan system or AutoCAD kind of environment. And they can open up a simple PDF, they can zoom in, they can see exactly which room I need to go to. If I have access through this area over here, I can tell that the asset is maybe tagged in this room. And so I know when I get to site, I don't have to go and ask around, where do I find this thing? I've got an issue. I know, okay, it's over there. I arrive, I walk straight there, I get the problem solved. So it's not just about data to keep data. It's also about saying, well, let's use that data to get service done as quickly as possible. So then the asset is fully integrated into the backend ERP. So we want to make sure that we're running depreciation against that. We want to make sure that we're following the rules from a tax point of view to make sure how we're depreciating and how long we're going to be writing with those assets for. We want to look at maybe cost allocations. Maybe you're building a new building or a new piece of sports equipment or something like that, and maybe an AstroTurf. And we want to control all the procurement around that in a complex kind of project environment where there's costs and there's contractors and suppliers and all that kind of thing. And ultimately, that capital project turns into an asset that we then need to manage and maintain. And it's the beautiful thing about this, all done in one holistic environment, which is really, really nice. Again, if you don't go for Dynamics ERP, it's no problem. We can connect back into whatever your ERP you're running, and we can kind of mimic that same functionality. Lastly, the idea is to make sure that we can keep all that history in one place, as I said, and manage and maintain everything. Okay, so the last piece of the puzzle for today is to just talk about, great, we've spoken about data, we've spoken about security, we've spoken about assets and facilities management, and now what are the kind of things that we're doing in this institutional operational space, and how can Microsoft help us with this? So in order to have a conversation, I just wanted to kind of set up a couple of key things. So firstly, the way that Dynamics and the whole Microsoft environment works is that we want to give access to anyone at any time, obviously in a secure way, obviously controlled properly through the right IT principles, but we want to make sure that whether they're using a laptop, whether they're on a tablet or a mobile, as Graham was saying, different users for different purposes. The backend administrators would log in maybe on their laptop, but a student would log in and consume information and data over their mobile phone. Maybe a member of faculty will log into the portal on their tablet device. So we need to make sure that we're building once, and that's made available over the different kind of ways that people access technology. The next thing is that being Microsoft products, these things are all fully integrated. So if I wanted to have an asset management tool, a requisition, the asset requisition tool, I could put that inside of Teams. We can share maybe work orders through Teams. And so as Teams becomes this massive environment where we're sharing, collaborating, we're using it to educate, we're doing more with it, we can bring that whole Dynamics environment into Teams, and we can make sure that the organization is sharing the right information with the right people. The system is completely flexible. So a lot of the stuff that we've showed you today is not how it comes out the box. It's things that we've done in working with institutions to say, hey, how do we mold the solution around your organization, around your specific business processes? And here's some rules that we can set up to say, if this condition is met, then I need to follow these principles. And we can get really, really, really highly complex, but to do it in a way that is to use technology terms, in a low-code, no-code kind of environment where I can set up complex business rules and workflows without writing a single line of code. And that just makes sure that you can maintain the systems, that you can support them going into the future, and everything's beautiful. And finally, just on this, before I get into a couple of scenarios, the idea here is that once we've got all this data, we want to bring in the power of Power BI, and we want to embed this intelligence everywhere so that I can report and consume information about all these things wherever I am, whether I'm on my mobile or whatever. And Power BI at the moment is so powerful that I could just pick up my mobile phone, open up the app and start talking to my data, saying, hey, can you show me which dining hall is most popular today? And it would bring you back some information. So putting that intelligence in the hand of those that need it is super, super important. So from a scenario point of view, I'm going to show you a couple of things that we've done with the Nelson Mandela University down in PE. Craig's probably a little chuckle to himself, some stuff that he was involved in ages ago, but over time we've helped to evolve, and this is a simple kind of situation where we said, okay, similar to the Curo environment that I showed before, where we've got the ability to log from an internal staff point of view, from the ability to log an IT call, or the ability to connect with human resources to maybe log an issue or whatever the case may be. So staff members come to this portal, they start typing, and as they start typing, the options start getting filtered based on what they're typing. This person has got a problem with email, and so ultimately they want to log a call with IT to say, something's wrong with my email account, please can you help me? And of course we can, over here, we can inject things like knowledge base articles to say, oh, are you trying to log a call about email? Well, did you know that you can solve the problem yourself following X, Y, or Z principle? The idea is real self-service. We did a survey recently with students, and we asked them, how would you like to engage? If you had self-service, would you use it? And we had a vast majority of them that said, I absolutely would, but it depends on the context. So portals like this are really good for staff to log issues, to maybe escalate or see what's happening without needing to send emails and pick up phone calls. And students want to use it for that purpose too, except when it comes to things of, the course that I'm studying, or if it's about exams, or if it's about something like that, I really want to be speaking direct to a person. And so we've got to think about the context of the person, whether it's a student, whether it's a member of faculty or whatever, to say what can we help them through technology to answer some of their questions as quickly as possible. Anyway, that email case would come into Dynamics. I'm not going to go, this is just the same kind of case logging screen that I showed you earlier around Taylor and his broken laptop. Slightly different kind of look and feel, but following the same principle. We can overlay this, I alluded to it earlier, with a virtual bot, and here's virtual agents, which is now actually not, it's out of preview and launched into general availability, but you can go build complex bot interactions, automated interactions, using no code at all, through this designer tool, where we say, I want to go and say, I can contact this printer directly to get more information. Would you like me to do so? And then give some answers, and then based on the answers, I can follow different branches. It's really pretty straightforward to set up once you've had a little bit of training on it. You don't need to be a developer to understand these things, and you can go and set up really complex interactions. And the beautiful thing about a bot is that it can deal with a lot of queries and self-service kind of issues. So what's the content on the exam this coming week? You can set up a bot to do that. Why not? When is my warranty up for my laptop because I need a new one? Ask a bot. The bot will give you an answer. Hey, is there budget for me to put through an expense? That kind of thing. Whatever you could think of, the bot could go and access that huge data universe that's sitting in Dynamics, and it could give you the answers. And at some point, the bot, you might lose interest as a person, and you want to deal with a human being. And so that's when we can bring that in through things like this omni-channel kind of experience, where this is the bot conversation. The person who was having the conversation, May, with the bot, she indicated, I want to move over to a live chat with a human being, please. And so I'm Lily, the technician, or the person in student service or whatever. And I've said, cool, I can see a chat coming in, and so now I can take over from the bot, and I can talk to May, and I can help her with her issues. I'm going to access the knowledge base at the top here. I can see any kind of recent interactions that we've had with May, and what's going on, so that I can solve her problem as quickly as possible. So really nice use of technology to do things in a more streamlined way, and whether that's WhatsApp, whether it's Facebook Messenger, whether it's live chat, whether it's telephony, whatever. We can bring that conversation through one gate and manage all those conversations using Dynamics. Once we've done that, we can produce some amazing reports. And this is an example of the AI-infused customer service insights, where it's looking at resolution times and it's trying to spot trends and say, this particular agent is having problems dealing with issues, etc., etc., etc. It even does a little bit, I wouldn't say creepy, but quite intensely, can listen to the phone calls, can determine sentiment, can say the agent's talking too much, not letting the student talk enough, or whatever. There's a bunch of things that we can do when we have access to that data, and that's a really exciting thing. I think we're now no longer limited by the technology. We're only limited by our imagination and the application of that technology to solve some of the problems that you're facing in day-to-day life. And so, yeah, that's pretty much rounding up on the content to say, across this connected campus, there's so much that could happen. There's so many improvement that we could take, little steps in the journey towards this transformative environment. And Microsoft has got some really, really strong answers in this space. And we are, as a partner, super excited to be working with some of the country's top institutions at the moment to solve these problems, and super happy to talk about how we could help you. So that's us for the day. A little bit ahead of schedule. So if you have questions, welcome to stay behind and chat. And if not, then you're welcome to drop off and we'll say cheers.
Thank you so much, Sean. Very informative session.
Thanks, Chris. Glad you enjoyed it.